All right, now for the panel, and I see you're all here, and I have some questions for you. Maybe we start with Hans Christian. You talked a little bit about batteries and so on expensive real estate, like in big flow batteries I'm talking about now, that takes a large place and so on. But in other areas close to the power grid outside inner cities, what do you think about large scale flow batteries?
Good question. I think that it may have a role. We have just not, in the markets we're active in at the moment, which is primarily Nevada, California, and Arizona, with CAISO being absolutely the biggest one. We see that the most competitive system we can deploy and kind of develop at the moment is still lithium-ion style systems, even in the areas where you have access to more space, like out in the desert where we're doing solar projects. We have not gone into, I will admit that we have not fully evaluated flow batteries, but the preliminary analysis we're doing at the moment points us in the direction of sticking with the lithium ion, at least for the foreseeable, for the next few years.
Right, thank you. And I have a question for Björn Paulsson. Maybe it's a negative issue, and if it's too much of litigation involved, you don't have to answer. But what was the reaction to the accident in Aliso Canyon, and what was the main cause in your opinion?
The main cause was poor maintenance and no monitoring of the wells. They had 114 wells, if I recall correctly, injecting and producing natural gas out of this gas storage field. And instead of, I mean, this is well known, instead of injecting it through just the tubulars like a safe operation would do, they injected and withdrew from the casing. So they had no extra barriers, flow barriers. When the casing broke or got corroded, the gas went out through the casing, and there was nothing stopping it except for drilling several replacement wells and kind of intersecting the leaky well. It was a bad operation.
Room for improvement.
No,
Richard,
absolutely.
I have a question for you and for PowerCell. In 5 years, where do you see most of PowerCell's business coming from, of the segments you mentioned?
Quite often when I get asked that question, it depends on where we see most intense activity. I would say stationary, where we see a massive growth, and we also see that's a confined area where you can get distribution of hydrogen, storage of hydrogen in a controlled manner. Buildings have a tendency to stay in one place. Vessels and vehicles tend to move around. So stationary has the characteristic of a market that can take off rapidly. But then we see initiatives from the marine segment as well, and also from off-road. So it depends on. I will come back with that question a couple of years from now and say this is what happened. But we see massive potential in all areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Erik, what is your estimate of the annual value of the green hydrogen business in 10 years in Norway and in Europe? Stick your finger up in there.
Yeah, I don't think I dare to do that, because if you look at Norway, it's a discussion about green and blue hydrogen, and it's people don't really want to talk about the blue hydrogen, and that's the same also in Europe. So if I want to reach hydrogen society, you need to go around blue hydrogen. We all want to go to renewable afterwards, but that will take time. So we have to start one place. But as long as there are no clear target here from a government around Norway and in Europe, it's not easy to guess that. So I don't dare to guess it. So yeah.
Okay. Next question, I think, Geir, you have already answered to a large part. What's your view on use of your technology in large ocean crossing vessels now, like I just talked about the large container ships and so on, and for example, used through the Suez Canal or areas like that, where you don't want to pollute as much?
We have already batteries on board the vessel for Maersk, more for
Okay.
a while. They want to use that. They use it purely for a spinning reserve. Instead, when they have to, for example, Suez Canal, that you don't have to have all your auxiliary running in case of the pilot wants to use the bow thruster. The battery is there as a spinning reserve. But we also see that on some of the new container ships, like the Maersk, we have done the battery ready, is that especially that you can load the auxiliary engines much harder, because then you have a battery in the system that take that unknown load, for example, from the reefer containers. So you don't have to have all engines idling, and you can really optimize the one on those. And that is the same also we see for a very boring bulk carrier or things like that you will ending up with 2 auxiliary engines and a battery bank instead of 3 auxiliaries, and you can run them much harder because you don't have a blackout. So we can a hybrid solution can optimize all kind of vessels, and you see from some of the bulk carriers we also then can regenerate from the cranes. A lot of energy today is wasted when you're lowering things.
Very good. Thank you, Geir. And a question for Mr. Paulson. You just mentioned briefly the capture of carbon. Do you see, and you had a fairly small number for that, do you see that market growing? Underground storage or capture of CO2?
Yes, absolutely. In order to reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere, we have to capture it, preferably at the sources, because that's the least expensive way to capture it. But and inject it in, and so say the underground reservoirs is the most economical way to store it. I mean, maybe it's even the only way to store it long term, because eventually it transforms into minerals, mineralization. On the long run, I mean, we talk about hundreds of years, but we will definitely we have to do capture the CO2 and store it.
Thank you very much. Eirik, I have a question for you. What are the risks of transporting hydrogen or ammonia by ship long distance? Has there been any major mishaps?
I don't think there have been no major mishaps, but both hydrogen and ammonia is extremely risky, and also so the safety and mitigate the risk is very important here. But if you do it correct, that shouldn't be a problem. I mean, we have a lot of experience from a gas, from transporting LNG, LPG, ethylene, and such things. Yeah, so you just have to do the right thing here. So yeah.
Okay, very good. And you're following the IMO standards and so on. So I mean, there are very high standards, right?
Yeah, but not everything is clarified yet. That's the same when we started with LNG as fuel. We didn't have all rules ready, and that's when you have a new project, you start to develop, you get the IMO involved, and you get the class involved, and then you start to mature all the regulation and rules. So, but at the end, it will be a IMO standard, I think.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question actually that goes to all of you. What are the international expansion challenges you face from Nordics to USA, Asia? Where would you need support on to expand into international